Since you've managed to find this video, odds are that you are a pro gamer, and as a pro gamer, there are probably a few things that are so ingrained in you that you probably don't even think about them. Things such as consuming worrying amounts of energy drinks, severe cases of carpal tunnel, permanent indents on our heads, and many more. Among those previously mentioned, many more. We have the controls we use for pretty much every game where you control a single character, that being to use W, AS, and D to move. These controls are pretty much universal at this point, meaning that you are all probably very familiar with them. But what if we change that? I personally don't have that kind of formal power, so the best I can do is to impose this handicap on myself alone. So I've decided to use this stupid little means of borderline self-harm of an idea by attempting to beat hardcore Minecraft under these conditions. And to help me find our new controls, I've decided to use a randomizer for the key bindings for each of the controls. These key bindings could be exactly anything, as I decided to use every single key on my keyboard as the pool that the randomizer could pull from. So I set up a spreadsheet with all of the controls that were going to be randomized and got to work using the randomizer wheel I found on Google. And after a while, I had ended up with our new key bindings, which I intended to use to beat hardcore Minecraft. I also decided to unbind the other controls from the ones I had randomized, as my abnormally pathetic level of patience didn't allow me to keep spinning the wheel for a bunch of controls I wasn't going to use anyways. But with that, we were finally ready to take on this latest installation of my masochistic challenges. And as with all previous installations, I'm not allowed to use any armor during this challenge whatsoever. As you may have noticed, I've also decided to add a hand cam, as I thought that would be appropriate for this challenge. So now you all know just how disgusting my desk and hands are. You are very welcome. And right as I loaded into the world, I spent a few seconds having an aneurysm trying to figure out where my left hand would go. I also realized that our sneak was bound to the right side of our keyboard, meaning I had to press it with my right hand, effectively rendering it useless. Safe to say, the confusion was of the highest order, but I did eventually manage to figure out how to get my hands on some wood, meaning that we were officially making progress towards our goal. Now all I had to do was to figure out how to open our inventory so that I could actually use that said wood. And after yet another quick little aneurysm, I figured it out and made some tools. Since we had been rather unlucky and spawned in a birch forest, I didn't manage to find a village in our near vicinity. So I thought it might be a good idea to kill some nearby sheep in case we wouldn't find one before sundown. I then set off by boat, where I realized that our key bindings for strafing required the use of both hands, making the experience of boating about as pleasant as having a DIY vasectomy. But after that traumatic boating experience, I did manage to find a village somewhat quickly after having set ashore. So I proceeded with the standard Minecraft experience of stealing all of the village's produce, killing their only protection from the creatures terrorizing the locals at night, and stealing their riches. I also decided to grab a bow and arrows, as I thought it might be a bad idea to take on a bunch of blazes with a melee weapon whilst handicapped as severely as I am. And rather luckily, there was actually a lava pool in the village, meaning we could make our way to the nether immediately, which was very epic. But even though I was shitting myself as I tried making a portal, as I kept accidentally walking forward instead of hitting and placing blocks, I did succeed without getting clapped. Once in the nether, I immediately got to mining gold and looking for a nether fortress. The reason I needed a decent amount of gold was to barter with piglins to get my hands on potions of fire resistance, as that would hopefully mean that I wouldn't have to move as much whilst farming the blazes, making it less likely for me to completely screw myself over. But after having spent close to an hour in the nether bartering with piglins and looking for a nether fortress, I apparently looked at an enderman who immediately provided a clapping of biblical proportions. This meant that I had wasted about 1.5 hours of my time, only to accomplish as much as I do in an average day in real life, so I created yet another world, ready to do so yet again. But at this point, I had actually gotten pretty decent at using my new key bindings, which made things a bit easier. I was also quite lucky, as I managed to find a village relatively quickly, meaning that I could go to the nether almost immediately, which was very epic. However, our luck ran out, as it took an absolutely obscene amount of time to find a nether fortress, and to make things even worse, both of the spawners in said fortress were really inconveniently placed, as one of them was completely exposed and had lava running down the stairs leading to the spawner. The second one was caged, but on the same level as the ground. This caused a bunch of other mobs to wander right up to the spawner and make my life significantly harder than it needed to be. And because of this absolutely abhorrent spawner location, I got blindsided by a piglin that followed me into my safe area that I had built for farming the blazes. This means that we had added yet another 1.5 hours to the amount of time that we've wasted, bringing our total up to 3 hours. So I created our third world in high hopes of not wasting yet another 1.5 hours. I started off by doing the standard Minecraft things, that being to defile Mother Nature, make some tools, defile Mother Nature yet again, and set off in search of a village. But as I found one, I realized that the village barely had any hay bales, resulting in us not having enough emeralds to buy a bow and arrows. This meant that we had to chop down a bunch of trees and convert nearby animals into their non-living and edible form. And rather luckily, as I was having a look around the village, I managed to spot some iron, which was the kind of news my mental health was in desperate need of. After having acquired all of the food and wood I needed to get all of the arrows I needed along with a bow, I was finally ready to make my way to the Nether, and rather conveniently, there was actually a lava pool right next to the village whose inhabitants I had financially exploited. But as I entered the Nether, my heart sank as I was faced with the fact that I had spawned in a crevasse with no real Nether in sight. Defeated, I started digging into the wall to make my way out, and after a while, I had finally managed to find the real Nether, which was very epic. However, I was rather high up, which was rather inconvenient, as that meant that our tunnel would likely be significantly harder to find when we head back. So to counteract this issue, I placed some dirt to mark where it is, like the absolute professional I am. The next step from here was the exact same as in my 2 previous attempts, which was to grab a bunch of gold to barter with piglins, to in turn get our hands on potions of fire resistance. In an ideal world, I also wanted 10 pieces of obsidian, as that would mean that I could simply make a new portal and wouldn't have to navigate back to my scuffed dirt pillar. But as I was abusing our deformed financial exploitation victim, I didn't actually manage to get that much obsidian. I did, however, get a whopping 13 ender pearls, which was absolutely insane, as this game usually screws me over completely when it comes to the collection of pearls. So I saw that as a sign from above and decided to continue gathering enough gold to get enough pearls to get to the stronghold. But right as I started grabbing more gold, I saw that my subtitles were picking up sounds from blazes. I don't think I've ever found a nether fortress through subtitles before, but I was most certainly not complaining, as we had spent about 50 minutes in the Nether at this point, and my mental health had deteriorated to the point where I could feel my therapist quivering. So I decided to tackle the Nether fortress before grabbing the rest of the pearls, as if we were going to die. It was most definitely going to be there. Seeing as I had died twice in the Nether at this point, I decided to take all of the safety measures I could think of. I'm unfortunately not very creative or well versed in the act of thinking, so I just put up a few walls and a door to the spawner and called it a day. But since the spawner wasn't swarmed with a bunch of both zombified and normal piglins, the genocide I had decided to inflict upon the blazes actually went pretty smoothly, and after having spent some time spawn killing like a careless teenage girl, I had successfully managed to get my hands on enough blaze rods to get to the stronghold. As I left the Nether fortress, I remembered that Endermen exist and that I had found a warped forest, which made me realize that I didn't have to mine gold to barter with piglins to get the last pearls I needed. With that, I started making my way back to my scuffed little dirt pillar, but whilst on my way, I ran into a ruined portal, meaning that the obsidian I had was enough to make a functioning portal, which was very epic. However, since the game absolutely despises me, the portal was generated in a cave, meaning I had to dig my way out, like some sort of peasant. All we had to do now was to locate the stronghold, so that I could end my suffering. This was pretty straightforward, except for the fact that I somehow missed the stronghold on the first hole I dug. But I did manage to find it the second time around, which is better than I usually do, which in of itself is rather depressing. I then made my way to the portal room, which was surprisingly easy, and made my way through, where I was faced with the incredibly rewarding gameplay of digging my way out of an endstone cage. Then began the incredibly action-packed and exciting dragon fight. I was then showered by the dragon's balls once again. As some of you who have watched my other content might know, I usually use F3 quite a lot when I play Minecraft, especially when I try to beat the game, as it makes it a lot easier to find my way back to the portal in the Nether, as I can save the coordinates. I also use it to show hitboxes to make it significantly easier to hit all of the crystals and avoid eye contact with Endermen. But since I didn't randomize the F3 key binding, I assumed that I had unbound it like all the other ones. This was apparently not the case, as I later discovered that I could have used it all along, and that I had made my life significantly more annoying than it needed to be. But with that depressing revelation, our suffering had finally come to an end, so there we have it. I beat Minecraft Hardcore with completely randomized key bindings. I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave a like and subscribe if you did, and I'll see you in the next one. And in case you'd like to give this a go for yourself with the exact same key bindings as me, you can find the list in the description below.